All right, welcome and thanks for joining our info session for the evening. This info session is going to be about the CSA, the process of the CSA, kind of what that looks like each month, as well as how the herbs are grown, who's growing the herbs, and yeah, we'll answer any questions that folks have about CSAs. I hope that everybody knows what a CSA is, but just in case, does anybody want to fill the rest of us in on what a CSA model looks like? Maybe you've done one before. Anybody brave?
I can try. It's Martha. Community supported agriculture.
Yeah. So yeah, community supported agriculture. So basically what's happening is that we're entering into a partnership, right? As the farm, we're asking for your membership basically, and you're giving us seed money kind of in the beginning of the season. And then we promise to provide you with herbs every month. Some people do this with vegetables. I've seen a bread CSA, a bakery CSA, a coffee CSA. So yeah, basically the idea is that we're forming a partnership. And part of that partnership is also understanding that yeah, that like farming is actually kind of hard, and that sometimes things happen and we lose a crop, and that, you know, that's kind of part of the bargain that we're having together as well, right? Is that like we might not have access to everything that we thought we did, but generally we do have access to all this stuff, and we have the support of you all from the very beginning to make sure that we can get all those plants in the ground. So yeah, I do feel like it's a more community like interlocking and interdependent way of trying to source your herbs or source your food. So I hope that folks have experienced a CSA before, have felt like that was a good experience for you. I'm going to share a couple of things on my screen for y'all. I want to start with a little bit about our CSA. All right. Share this. I'm going to make us smaller. There we go. All right. So I wanted to start by just showing you some pictures of the farm, as well as some of the folks that have been really integral to making the CSA come to be. We have an internship program and a volunteer program at Foxhaven that really creates the possibility for the CSA. And so through this exchange with the interns, and I'll talk a little bit about what the interns receive in exchange, this is how folks are able to help us to provide the herbs that go into each month's share. So here on the left, this is some of us doing some weeding of the echinacea, and on the right there, we were testing out some recipes together in the bottom right, and on the top right, we were harvesting some Japanese knotweed and processing that. On the left, looks like we were processing oats that day, like taking the oat straw from the oat tops. On the top right, looks like we were doing wakate. So we were harvesting kind of the last of the season. And the bottom right, there is a spring picture where we were doing a bunch of weeding and kind of getting that early season crop ready. That was Elecampane that we were working with there. On the left here is Ezra picking some peach leaves from Mutu Orchard, which is one of the partners that we have in the CSA. Most of the herbs are grown at Foxhaven, but we do have some partner farms and other spots that we can go and harvest certain things. So Mutu Orchard happens to have all of these peach trees that they don't spray. And so we can harvest the leaves and bring the leaves to the CSA. Bottom right there, that's Julianka from a couple of years ago, harvesting, I think she was working on the bee balm in there. So our interns are a group of 5 folks per season. We have 5 that come in the spring and then 5 that come in the fall, and they come 2 to 3 times a week. And our time together is really like woven in there with education. And so the whole time that we're working, we're also learning about the herbs and kind of trying to meet their goals, right? They're also going to be CSA members. So you're going to see some of these interns in the CSA classes. They also become foraging members, which is another class we have at Foxhaven. And they have some other benefits as well. Here's a little bit more about their education. They kind of learn like the seed to the CSA processing and all the drying and post-harvesting that we do. and they get to learn about using herbs in their daily life. We take a field trip to another herb farm, and we have opportunities to teach and study with each other. This was us visiting Sacred Root Farm. Someone's trying to get in. And then, all right, sorry about that. Let me go back to sharing. Here's some things that we've made over the season with the interns, and also things that we talk about in class, in the CSA classes, like how to make these kind of infusions. On the left there is a apple cider vinegar and rose infusion. And the top right is actually a ferment. It's with eggplant and peppers, and then we put all kinds of culinary herbs in there. And on the bottom right, we made some herbal breads. We put nettles and burdock into our bread. We also made these burgers on the top right with all kinds of like yummy herbs in there. And we made some burn bundles, and we've done all kinds of tea tastings. So these are also kind of things that we bring into the CSA, right? That each month we're learning some skills together, and we're thinking about different ways that we can use the herbs in the share. And then here's some volunteers and interns that have helped over the years with harvesting and seed saving. Some of the other folks that work in the garden and help bring the CSA into being are the folks at the Clearview Communities. These are folks that tend to come out once a week or so, and it's a rotating group of folks that are kind of working through therapeutic mental health issues, and they're lovely to have in the garden with us. And we have the folks from RSVP, the Retired Senior Volunteer Program that's through the Asian American Center. And these are all retired and senior volunteers that often have a really long history of doing gardening or working with plants. Like this is In May, and she worked for NIH, and so she's like into researching and talks all about the plant constituents. And so we like nerd out about that a lot. And then Pat, another one of our ladies, has just been gardening for a really long time, and she teaches me so much every time she comes out and works in the garden with me. We also have Mom's Organic Market that comes out and volunteers with us a lot, a couple of times a year at least. And it's really cool because moms will pay their employees to come work with us. And then we also have the ARC of Washington County. And so these are folks with developmental and different abilities, and they come out and work with us in the drying area and in the gardens. We just have a rotating group of folks that comes on a regular basis. And here's some pictures of us doing stuff together with the ARC. So these are all the folks, in addition to myself and Taylor, our orchardist, who kind of bring all of the herbs together to be able to have a CSA together. All right, so the herb CSA. So our herb CSA, the fresh CSA, runs from May to October. We do have a meet and greet that starts in April, and that's kind of an opportunity for us to chit chat, do some tea tasting, get to know each other, start kind of like having a group rapport. And then the herbs will start coming in May, and they'll go all the way through October. And then in November, we have a end of the season celebration at the farm where we usually harvest something together and do another tea tasting at the end. And so altogether it's April to November, but the herb bundles come from May to October. We have 3 locations this season. We have Frederick, that's going to be on first Sundays. We have Baltimore, that's going to be on third Saturdays, and College Park, that's going to be on third Sundays. This was last year a picture from Larder. We were outdoors in Baltimore at Larder. This year we'll be at Blue Light Junction, which is going to be really fun because they're an indigo farm and dye community. So we'll learn about a lot of the same plants actually that we use in herbalism are also used for dyeing. So you have 2 options, right? You choose a location and then you have 2 options. Your one option is the Apothecary Share. And this is for members who maybe already have a background in herbs, already have a practice, or they're folks that like to learn by themselves. They don't like to be in group settings as much, or they maybe just know they don't have time for that this year, but they want access to herbs. And so these folks will get 5 herbs. I'll choose 3, and they will choose 2 every month. And they'll get a study guide that has information about the herbs that I chose. And then the 2 herbs that they choose, they're kind of on their own for figuring out. They can always email me, we can always chat about it, but they're a bit more kind of like, yeah, figure out what you want to do with these. And And you can come to class as an apothecary member, but just know that the class is kind of designed for the relationship share, the beginning folks. And so you can definitely come to class, but it just maybe won't be about the herbs that you're getting in your share. So the other share is called the relationship share. And this is for folks that want a communal way of learning. So here's a picture from Frederick when we were doing our relationship share. So all these folks were tasting tea together and talking about the energetics together. And we spend about 2 hours together at the pickup, learning about the herbs, tasting the herbs, and talking about what we're going to do with them. So you get 4 herbs a month, and you get a study guide with all kinds of info. And I'll show you an example of the study guide. And yeah, class is 2 hours. And in that class, we'll either make something together for you to take home, or we'll learn a skill together that you can then practice at home with the herbs that you get. One of the things that we're doing differently this year is that at the end of class, the last half an hour, we're going to do what's called a protocol roundtable. So I'm going to send out a prompt earlier in the month for something like, here's an example of a prompt. Like, think about a time when anticipation got the best of you. And what did that feel like in your body? Like, what were the symptoms? How long did it last? What was the arc of the symptoms? And so before class, you'll write those things down. And then when we come together, we'll share those symptoms or that kind of like picture. And each of us can then kind of give feedback to the group of like herbs that come up as possible options. So an example of that might be like, oh, anticipation. When I have to go on an early morning flight, like I get a lot of anticipation and I can't sleep the night before and I'm worried and I'm nervous and I'm like freaking out a little bit. Are there any herbs that kind of come up as ones that might be really helpful? And so it's a way of helping us to think about our life situations and start to put into practice and knowing about herbs so that we can start reaching for herbs when those situations arise. That's something that's open to everybody, whether you're an apothecary member or a relationship member, and it'll happen every month, the last half hour of class. Each month there is a theme. And so the themes kind of go with the plants, actually. The plants tell us usually. So in the early part of the year, we're getting a lot of really nutritive crops up. And so we're going to do food as medicine. That's when we're going to talk about nettle, and we're going to have some garlic chives. And maybe we'll have a maitake mushroom that first month, and we're going to make a vinegar together. The second month, we have our protective skin, and we're going to make a salve together. And that's when we have things like violet leaf, and we might have peach leaf then, and we'll definitely have plantain leaf and yarrow. July is our summer soothers, and we're going to make soda together. And that's when we have a lot of our just like super delicious herbs like lavender and bee balm. And August is when we might start seeing some of our nervines, our really nice nervines like passion flower and lemon balm and holy basil. And on that month, we're going to make a pastille together, which is a dry herb that's been powdered, and you mix it with a little bit of honey to make it into kind of like a pill. Like it looks like a small pill maybe, and then you can take those on a regular basis. I like to take them with meals. Sometimes I'll make bitter ones so I can use it before a meal to kind of stimulate digestion. September is going to be herbs that are for the kitchen. We're going to make a syrup together. And then October is a lot of our root medicines, and we're going to do a winter remedy together. And at the end of the season, November, we'll have that end of the season celebration, and we'll make a fire cider together to take home. And then these are a couple of my favorite herbs from the garden. On the left is hyssop, and on the top right is mullein flower, and the bottom right is hibiscus. All right. I'm going to pause there and ask if anybody has questions so far. I'm curious if folks have a place in mind, whether they're thinking about Frederick or Baltimore or DC. You can either come off mute, or you could drop it in the chat if you already have an idea of where you would want to be a member potentially. Thanks, Frederick. Oh, good, College Park. Nice. Yeah, and so the nice thing about all of us being about an hour away from each other, right? Like Frederick kind of sits in a triangle with DC and Baltimore, is that if you know you're not going to be able to make it to your usual CSA, like say you're a Frederick member, let's say you're a Frederick member, but you know, like, oh, I'm going to be gone on July 3rd. I already know that. You could email me ahead of time and say, hey, I'm actually not going to be here. So you have a couple options, right? You could double up next month and say like, I'm going to get double my herbs next month, or you could go to a different CSA location on the other day, right? So you could say like, I'm not going to be there for July 3rd for Frederick, but I'd like to come to the Blue Light Junction one in Baltimore in 2 weeks. And as long as we have communication about that, we're totally okay with folks kind of like moving around as they need to. It's difficult if like everybody's moving around every month. So we do ask folks to try to like stay with their location, right? But we can totally be flexible about that because I know we all have busy schedules, and yeah, it's nice to be able to get the herbs on that month. Awesome. Great. So yeah, it looks like a lot of Frederick folks, a couple Baltimore folks. Some folks already signed up, which is great. All right, I want to show you, let's see, next. I want to show you what a CSA newsletter looks like. Oh, there's a question here. LaDonica, you asked about a pay per household or per individual. The CSA is meant for, it's meant for one person or a household, really. Like for each month, you'll get 4 bundles of herbs if you're doing the relationship share. So, you know, when you take that home, you might make a vinegar and you might make a tincture and maybe you'll make a tea. And certainly there's enough of that that you can share that with family members as well. So it's kind of just like one size. And for the most part, you can make things with each of those bundles that will serve more than one person. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, I want to show you what a study guide looks like, because each month I'll send out a study guide. Okay, so you can see that. So each month in your mailbox, you'll get one of these, and it'll have some information on there about like, oh, this month we're going to make an infused in vinegar. So here's a little guide on how to do that. Oh, and here's the tea tasting worksheet that we use every month. So I'll give you a little bit of an intro to what the month is going to bring for you. And then I'll tell you what herbs are going to be in the share. So this was last year. So the herbs that we had in May was garlic chives, nettles, burdock root, and violet leaf. And for anybody that wants to order extra herbs in their share, there's a spreadsheet here that they can put their name on extra herbs and say like, oh, I want nettles, or I want yellow dock, or I want things that are outside of my share. There's like a time by which you have to do that, and we'll harvest for you. But yeah, you can definitely order extra. And then there's the apothecary members. So they got burdock, nettle, and yellow dock. And then I asked them to choose 2 herbs, and they do that on the Google spreadsheet. Paying for your herbs. If you have a relationship share or an apothecary share and you don't get extra herbs, you've already paid, right? Like you pay at the beginning of the year. But if you want to get extra herbs on top of your 5 or 4 herbs, depending on which share you have, those extra herbs you can pay by month. And most of our herbs are $3 or $5. Let's see if this works and takes us there. Yeah, great. So here we are. So here's like what all the options for were in May. So folks could choose like chocolate mint or fennel fronds or geranium root or horehound or Japanese knotweed. And the folks that wanted them went ahead and put their orders in over here. And if they chose more than their share, they just paid, per share, per herb. And most of the herbs are $3 or $5. So once you get past that, I have a little agenda for class. So in May, we were tea tasting the nettles and the violet. We did a little fermentation demo, and then we made infused vinegars together. And then for each of the herbs that you get in your share, there's a profile. And so each of them, so like nettle, for example, I talk a little bit about nettle, and I give you some links for like NIH studies, or here's a nettle pesto recipe, or here's a recipe for a hair rinse, right? Or a hair tea. And I'll also link to kind of what other herbalists are saying about that. Here's a recipe for soup. So for each of these herbs, you'll get kind of a little bit of a rundown of what they do, how they can be used, what their energetics are, and then some ideas for how you might use them. So there's burdock, violet leaf. And then if we keep going down, we have the Apothecary Share. And so these are the folks, they got nettle and burdock, but they also got yellow dock. So I gave them a little profile on yellow dock. And then here's some extra things that could be added to the share. And every month I'll do like a couple of things maybe as extras. And then I'll also put some links to classes that you can join. And all of the CSA members are also invited to come to one of our tours. So you can do a garden tour and tea tasting. You get 2 tickets for the year to come and do the tea tasting in the garden for free. So you could come twice, or you could bring a friend. So every month I'll kind of tell you like, oh, there's another one of these tours coming up. Like, remember that you can come for free if you want to. So that's what the newsletter looks like, or study guide. Does anyone have questions about that? So that goes out to you digitally. On the day of the CSA, we're making stuff together, we're tasting stuff, but I'm also going to give you this little paper cheat sheet, which is kind of like a faster version of some ideas. And it's also going to tell you which things store well and which things don't store well, or kind of how to store them. So for example, this one, we've got nettles, stores well in the fridge to remove the sting, steam, or blanch, and then store for a few days. Or asparagus, store in the fridge with the cut ends in a small tub of water. So I'm letting you know like how to store them and maybe how long you have. And then I'm giving you a couple of examples of things you can think about doing. Because what I've found, and the feedback that I've gotten over the years, is that this newsletter is great and it gives so many things to think about. But then on the day that you get your herbs, sometimes people are like, oh, I forgot all the things that were in that newsletter. Like, what do I do with these herbs? And so this is just like a little, what we call the cheat sheet to take home and maybe get your mind jump started, or maybe just help you remember how to store them. And so I wanted to show you on the website, this is the tab for the CSA. And so on this tab, you have an explanation of the membership types and the locations. Also a little bit of talk here about the BIPOC pricing for folks that would like to have 50% or $50 off. We can actually do more than $50 if you need that. Please reach out. We're happy to do that. And then we encourage folks that do not identify as BIPOC to consider paying more so that we can continue to offer more discounts for folks who do fall under BIPOC. And then these are your 3 options, right? Blue Light Junction, Vital Traditions, and Foxhaven. And if you go to one of those, you'll see that all of our dates are here to remind you what your dates are. And again, kind of like a little bit more of a breakdown and some pricing. I did want to show us the FAQ section. All right, so what is a CSA? We talked about that a little bit. What if you're going to be away and you can't come get your share? Just give me some notice, right? Let me know. And we can either double up next share. Sometimes I will dry things for people, just knowing that that might be the easiest option is for me to dry it and bring it dry for you the next month, or you can choose to go to another location. If you don't give me notice though, I'm going to kind of consider it like a no-show, and I'm going to make sure that those herbs that we harvested go to someone in the community that can use them. Where you pick up your shares based on which location you're choosing. And if you are interested in getting involved in the garden, we absolutely love for folks to come out and volunteer. And that's something that I can put you on a list and let you know like when we're going to be in the garden, what hours, what we're doing, and you can RSVP and come out as you choose. Yeah, and then a little bit about how our herbs are grown. We are not certified organic anymore. We were for many years. And I made the decision to pull out of certified organic for lots of reasons. One of them being that we wanted to start buying seeds from folks that we love, like Owen Taylor at True Love Seeds in Philadelphia. And one of the things about the organic certification is that it's a little bit of a binary. You're either organic or you're conventional. There's not a whole lot of in between there. And the rules kind of state that we have to only buy from folks that are certified organic, even if the people that we want to buy from are doing all of the same practices. They just don't pay for the label, and they don't have the same paperwork trail that is required for organic. And so it was hard for me to buy from folks like True Love Seeds. And so I had to buy from further out and from different companies that I didn't feel as connected to or didn't feel like were as reputable. And so that's one of the reasons. Another reason is that we really love to do plant teas for the tea plants. So we like to make like a tea out of comfrey or a tea out of nettle and spray that on our plants. There's a lot of things that benefits. It helps with growth, and it helps with their ability to uptake nutrients. And I found that was kind of a difficult thing to kind of get through the organic certification, mostly because it seems like organic certifications kind of require that there's a paper trail. And so it requires that you're buying things, and there's kind of this like consumerist mentality and less of a do-it-yourself mentality. And because we kind of blend some aspects of permaculture and earth care and just kind of like, ancestral ways of working with the land, that didn't seem to jive as well with the organic certification. And so there's still plenty of people that do it. And I think it's a great program for folks that love it and want to continue doing it. But I found that it wasn't the right fit for me for right now. We might go back to it at some point. But we still practice everything else that the organic certification requires. So we really don't use any sort of pesticide or fungicide or herbicide, whereas actually a lot of organic farms do use a lot of sprays. I think there's kind of a misconception that organic means no spray. That's not really true. It's just different kinds of sprays. And so we don't do a whole lot of that at all. Part of that is that we grow herbs and we're not growing vegetables. And so actually a little bit of insect, nibbling on the plants, or a little bit of, harsh sun on the plant is actually really great for the plant to produce more metabolites and produce more of the flavonoids and the alkaloids that we're looking for to use in our own bodies. And so herbal medicine does require a certain amount of stress for the plants. If we baby the plants, if we give them too much, fertilizer, if we, kind of help them along too much, they actually won't produce a whole lot of metabolites. They won't be very rich. They'll actually be kind of watered down. And I think we've probably seen this or heard about this in vegetable crops and fruit crops as well, right? If we're too nice to them, they don't actually produce as many nutrients. So that was one of the reasons I felt like it was actually kind of easy to not have to even think about using a lot of the sprays that somebody else might have to if they're growing vegetables. Yeah. So there's a little bit about that. How about now? Are there any questions? Okay.
Where did you get your drinking glass? That's pretty cool.
Oh, it has the poppies on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love my favorite flower.
What's it called? It's in Frederick. It's called Relish in Frederick.
Oh yeah, one of my favorite stores.
Yeah, it's really pretty, isn't it?
Mhm.
Okay. Angela, does the apothecary have a meeting each month? So not officially. You can come to any of the classes and sit in on the classes and drink the tea with us. The main things is that I won't have supplies for you to make things with us. So like if we're making a salve together for the relationship share, you can certainly be there and like watch, but you won't have the ability to make a salve with us unless a bunch of people don't come to class, in which case I'm happy to let you make a salve with us. So yes, you can come to class. That last half an hour, that protocol roundtable, is the time that I'm hoping that a lot of apothecary members will join us. That way we can each kind of like share information about what we're doing and also use our brains collectively to think about things like, yeah, like what herbs do we think of for these kinds of situations, and help each other brainstorm. So yeah, not a specific class for apothecary members, but you're welcome to come and collaborate. Any other questions?
I saw a class last month that I was unable to go to because of a previous commitment, but it was like candle making with pressed flowers and all. Will
Yeah.
you be repeating some of those others?
Probably, yeah. I think there might be another candle class on the schedule for this year, but it might not be till later in the season. Yeah. I won't be teaching that class specifically, although this month or this past month, we found a new location for Baltimore because we were previously at Larder. Now we're going to be at Blue Light Junction. But one of the things that I did was visit a couple places that might be a good fit. And one of them was KSM Candles in Baltimore. And we ended up not choosing that location, but we decided, the owner and I decided that we're going to do a couple classes together where we make candles in a group together and talk about the herbs that are going into the candles. So keep an eye out for that because there will be some, they'll be in Baltimore, but we will be doing some classes around that. All right, I did have a couple slides that I wanted to show you about global herb sourcing. So if there's no other immediate questions, I will move to that. All right, and the reason I like to talk about global herb trade is that growing herbs and having access to a lot of locally or domestically sourced herbs is still fairly new. Most of the herbs that are available in the United States come from elsewhere. And part of that coming from elsewhere is the ability to externalize some of the cost of the herbs, which maybe seems counterintuitive because it's like, well, if something is so far away, like why would it cost less? But a big part of that is that global wages are different around the world. And so one of the things that's kind of happening right now in the herbal world in the United States is that we're starting to see more and more people that want relationships with their farmers. They want to know where the herbs are coming from. They want maybe domestically grown herbs, but they're having a bit of sticker shock about how much it costs to farm herbs in the United States and buy herbs that are grown here. So I wanted to just kind of talk a little bit about where a lot of the herbs come from and how they're grown so that you have a bit of a comparison as we're kind of going through the process this year of working with fresh herbs. For one, it's just like, it's a joy and a pleasure to have access to fresh herbs. And the other is just kind of keeping in mind that if we want to have access to dry, fresh herbs from our region, they're going to look different and taste different and cost different than the herbs that we might get on the global market. All right, so a couple of subjects that we might want to touch on is how colonization, warfare, and changing economic and political structures have been a large part of how sourcing chains began and kind of what fuels them now. There's also a huge difference between the economic, ecological, and lifestyle realities in different herb producing countries versus our country. And there's a lot of externalized costs in the supply chain that mostly come in the form of ecological costs, right? That farming is already a difficult thing and is going to get more and more difficult as the world and kind of climate is changing. And we currently externalize a lot of those costs to other countries. So I wanted to just kind of bring up the Silk Road as kind of one of the major places where herbal global trade, has a history. And you can see from the Silk Road trade route, the red line here, right, that like this has moved like through Asia and mostly moved towards Europe. and that there's been many, many other trade routes that have gone in both directions since then. But a lot of this history comes from places in Asia and or Africa and kind of going towards Europe. And now, like, this trade is very much like global, right? Like the Silk Road was previous to having like more global trade. One of the main things that is of note about the Silk Route was the ways in which the people that were buying were separated from the places where herbs were being grown or other things, right? It wasn't just herbs, it was all kinds of things that were moving through this route. And this separation allowed for kind of the middle person, the middleman that was doing the trekking and the moving, to set the price. And that's still something that we see in global trade right now, is that the person that's kind of in the middle is often able to manipulate things to their needs or to their desires. This global trade has totally changed since the invention of the shipping container. Before the shipping container, herbs and all things had to be portaged down into the boat and out of the boat by hand. Once the shipping container was created, all of this could be done, mechanically, like with cranes. And, the shipping container really came into play during the Vietnam War. That's when like the widest use and the beginning of proliferation of the shipping container being used all over the world started. And so again, kind of like a lot of times these ways in which we gain access to countries and or have new technology has been kind of brought through warfare a lot of times. What's also of interest to me around things like that is that when these ports were created that could handle things like shipping containers and large amounts of movement of goods, we also see the rise of condensing workforces into smaller places that are closer to the port. So on the left here, this is Port Said in Egypt. On the left here is the garment industry, like the garment district that formed right next to the port. And so we can see that in herbs too sometimes. Much of the world's or the US supply of herbs comes from, well, it comes from all over the place, honestly. But if you're buying from Mountain Rose or Star West or Frontier, a lot of them you're going to see over and over and over again. Egypt, Turkey, Bulgaria, Albania, Hungary, Poland, India, China, Argentina, Sudan, Croatia. And a lot of these countries kind of like either came through the collapse of the Soviet Union and our kind of like insertion there to start having trade, or came from past warfare potentially, right? Or just kind of like ways in which like we were part of that. This is right from Mountain Rose's website. This is in yellow. The lighter yellow is where a lot of their herbs are sourced from. So again, kind of that like former Soviet Union area is where a lot of the herbs are sourced from. And I like to give an example for folks to understand kind of like what global pricing looks like in different places. This is Diaspora Co. They're out of LA, and Sana Javri Kadavi is the CEO and founder of Diaspora Co. And she's one of the people that I look up to really in this industry that has really been very transparent about the kinds of pricing that she prioritizes in her business and how she pays the farmer and kind of how she makes sure that she's doing the best that she can to make sure that the farmers are being taken care of. Because in a lot of global trade, that's not the priority usually of people that are bringing goods to the United States. So this is coriander that she sells, and she's got a bag there, a 395 gram bag, so less than a pound for $50, which is a lot, right? That's probably a lot more than we're used to paying for a pound of coriander if we buy coriander. She tells us where it comes from, right? And she even gives us the name of the family. So again, this is very different from the system of world global trade that kind of seeks to mystify or like keep us from that information. Like we're not supposed to know where it's coming from or like who's doing the actual farming. And so she's giving us that information. She's also telling us the harvest year. Most spices that are on the market that you buy from the grocery store are at least 3 years old. And she's kind of changing that system by giving us the harvest every year of that seed, right? So in this case, coriander. So every year you can buy that year's harvest of seed. And in that way, I also think it's similar to our CSA in the sense that it lets you look forward to that herb all season, right? You're like, oh, I can't wait for chamomile season, because maybe you can access it all year round if you go to your grocery store and buy chamomile bags. But when you kind of tap into what's growing at what time, you start to look forward to that. And it can be a form of both connection to the land, but also a celebration of each season when you look forward to it in that way. And so I appreciate that about her as well, that I know that I actually don't need to buy a whole lot of coriander because I'm going to buy some more the next season, right? And so I buy just what I need for that year instead of buying like this huge bag that I want to last for 4 years. I'm going to buy like the fresh stuff every year and support this farmer every year in smaller quantities. She gives a really great size guide here for like, you know, how many things that you can make with each of those, which I think is really helpful so that you don't need to over purchase, right? You can understand that like, oh, a small jar actually, like I can do a lot with that. And then this is her equity pledge of how much she pays the farmer. So the general price, right, the average commodity price here is 85 cents. And when I was looking at 85 cents for what, this is usually by the kilo. And so it's not like a pound, you know, it's not the same kind of ratio that we're used to. But I think this worked out to about like 2.2 pounds or something like that. So 85 cents for 2.2 pounds. Fair trade is 98 cents. And then the diaspora living wage is 3.39 USDA. And so you can see like that's a huge jump, right? From 85 cents to 3.39. And still, if we divide that by 2 to get to 1 pound, it's still not very much per pound that we're paying the farmer. And part of that just really has to do with the economics in those countries and what labor is worth in different countries, unfortunately. This is like farm income for different households. The farm that we're talking about is in Gujarat. So that's at the bottom of this. So this income from farming for a typical year, right? The total annual income for a farm household is $1,300. And, you know, the income from farming, the kind of farming that they would be doing to make coriander is $476. And so I think we can appreciate the difference between $1,300 as a yearly annual income and what we would hope that an American farmer or any worker in America would be making, right? Which is hopefully much more than that, right? Like, I don't know what the accepted rate is anymore, but I would think like, you know, whatever above minimum wages at this point, and that has been shifting over time because of inflation. I also wanted to point out that the Indian rupee, right? So that's like this is in rupees here, right? So this 95964 at the bottom right is in rupees, which translates to $1,300. A rupee is less than a cent, right? 1 rupee is 0.014 USD. So again, just kind of like, I like to bring up the fact that part of what makes it possible and quote easy to import herbs from other places is that we're not paying people very much. And if we look at different places like Star West, they're getting theirs from Egypt. So a pound from Star West is $12.75. Remember that Diaspora Co. is asking for $50 for their coriander seed, and they're paying much higher than most people. And then here we have Star West asking for $12.75 for a pound. I can only imagine what they're paying the farmer if they're only asking for $12.75 a pound. Here's Mountain Rose, $9, Egypt, 1 pound, certified organic. And then this is a single origin company that's in India and sells to India. And this quantity that they're selling here is $1.49, but they're like, that's considered expensive for what they're selling in India. This is how folks in India are preparing and harvesting the coriander seed. And this is actually how we would do it at Foxhaven as well, because we don't have fancy equipment. So when we grow seed crops like fennel, this is kind of how we do it as well. We're harvesting mostly by hand. They're using sticks here to beat the seed from the stalk. And then they're using hand sifting to remove the chaff and kind of like any debris. This is the exact same process that we use at Foxhaven, actually. And then here's a farm in Maryland that also grows coriander seed. They do happen to have a really great machine that helps with sorting and cleaning. And their coriander seed is $40 for 1 pound. So there's a whole lot more that I could say about that. And I have a lot more slides about that. But what I wanted to kind of like bring that forward around is just helping us to all kind of like understand the landscape of herb trade in the world, that there's so much money being kind of like moved around and made on herbal products and herbs that are being consumed. And oftentimes it's not the farmers that are kind of like making the money on that. It's those middle people. And so one of the benefits potentially of being part of a CSA is that, you know, all of your money is going to a farm, whether it's our farm or another CSA that you're joining. Hopefully more of that money is going to the people that are doing the labor, because farming is very labor intensive. I'm going to get off my soapbox for a second and ask if anybody has any questions or thoughts or things you want to add to the conversation. Right. Nothing coming up specifically. Well, we're at our hour. Oh yeah, thank you, Alex. We're at our hour. I wanted to maybe close by saying that if you are an herbalist, or if you're a product maker, or if you're a farmer or a potential farmer, Foxhaven also has a group called the Chesapeake Herb Shed, and that is herbalists, farmers, apothecaries, folks that are in the kind of like buying and growing realms or making realms from Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Virginia, and Maryland. And we meet once a month and we share information like this with each other. That's part of the presentation that I gave to them. And then we're also going to be doing farm tours and apothecary tours. So if that's of interest to you, shoot me an email, and I'm happy to get you involved with that group, because there's lots of great information being shared there around like kind of building a local economy and what that looks like. Thank you, Janelle. Yes, I hope that like the why of buying local is helpful. I don't want to say that it's not ever a good idea to buy globally though, because there are so many herbs that are grown in people's ancestral homes, right? And that herbs like belong in those climates and belong in those regions. Like gentian is one that comes up for me, that like gentian doesn't grow in a lot of places. It's a higher elevation plant, and they have to grow in kind of specific conditions. And I think that it's really beautiful and important to be able to access herbs from all over the world, but we need to pay folks what it's worth, you know, like pay them for the labor that they're doing and the stewarding of the environment that they're doing. All right. Alex, what CSA class options might you recommend for someone who is literally a total beginner to herbal preparations? So you have, I'd say there's maybe 2 options. One is that we have a class called Herbal Basics, and that meets once a month in Frederick, and it's on our website and it's on our Eventbrite. Herbal Basics, you'll learn 2 herbs per month, and you'll do a preparation together in class. It's a much slower pace. You're not taking home bundles. And so you're kind of just like working in class together. What's nice about that is that with a CSA, sometimes there's some stress that people incur of like, oh, I have all these fresh herb bundles and now I have to use them. If that seems like not what you want, then maybe try the Herbal Basics. Otherwise, I would say the herbal relationship might be the share for you, because you'll get 4 a month and I'll do all the research for you and we'll kind of talk it through together, but you will have to go home and kind of process. And I would say like set aside, 2 to 3 hours when you get home from the CSA to process. It takes a while. Um,
I have a question.
Please.
So I may be picking up a part-time job on the weekends here with the herbal basics. The classes, when do they generally occur and how often?
I think, let me look real quick, but I believe that they are second Saturdays. Let me pull it up real quick. Herbal basics. The first one's going to be in May. Here we go. Let me go ahead and share my screen so you can see this. This is on our Eventbrite. So it's a once a month thing, and she tells you what you're going to be doing each month. And it's second Sundays from 1 to 3, May to October.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Another thing we're doing this year that I thought I should mention is that in the CSA and any of our classes, we're adding a $2 land tax to everybody's ticket. We pay this land tax directly to the Piscataway Land Trust. These are Indigenous folks whose land we inhabit, that we are on. And so we pay a land tax as a way of acknowledging that we're on their land. Okay. Any other thoughts? Roxandra, I'm looking forward to meeting you. Yes, our first meeting is in April for our meet and greet. So we'll drink some tea together, we'll make a tincture, and we will get to know each other a little bit. And then the herbs will start rolling in May. All right, if nobody else has any thoughts or questions, I think that's all I have for us this evening. Thank you for joining, Alex, and everyone else. If you have any more questions, you can definitely reach out by email. I am Lacey@foxhavenfarm.org.
Thanks, Lacey.
Thank you so much. Right, bye y'all.